Welcome to Investing in Integrity. I'm Ross Overline, CEO and co-founder of Scholars of Finance, a rapidly growing organization on a mission to inspire character and integrity in the finance leaders of tomorrow. If you're an investor, finance professional, or student aspiring to make an impact with capital, this show is for you. Investing in Integrity brings you conversations with leading minds in finance to help you learn how you can make finance a force for good by investing in integrity. On today's episode, I got to sit down with John Geelan, the General Counsel and Secretary of Piper Sandler Companies. John's been an integral leader of Piper Sandler since 2005, now celebrating 20 years, beginning his tenure as Assistant General Counsel and now climbing his way to the top of the legal department there at the firm. He has deep expertise on corporate governance, public company reporting, corporate development. It's been pivotal in guiding Piper Sandler through complex legal landscapes and strategic growth. John also leads the Piper Sandler Foundation as its president, aligning the company's philanthropic efforts with its broader ethical goals for the communities in which they operate. He actually has a background in both economics and music from the University of St. Thomas, and he has a JD from the University of Notre Dame's Law School. He brings a really unique perspective on the intersection of law, finance, and corporate responsibility. We covered a lot of ground. First, we dive into John's story. Then we actually talk about the importance of creativity in our work and finding solutions to complex problems. We then pivot to talking about mental health. And we do a bit of a deep dive on some of the experiences John's had around him and in his own life with mental health, with increasing responsibility, very senior leadership roles. And it was really, really important to have that conversation, to continue breaking down this kind of silly stigma that surrounds mental health that so many people wrestle with in financial services, both young and old. Then we start shifting gears and we talk about his role as general counsel for our younger listeners, a little more clarity into what he does day to day. For our more senior executives listening, some perspective, some empathy that they would want you to have about their role and as a partner in the business. And then do a brief touch on AI and what implications AI might have for financial services, both from a legal and a productivity perspective. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And without further delay, here is John Geelan. John Geelan, it is such a pleasure to have you on the Investing in Integrity podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while now. Happy 2025. We have so much ground to cover, but before we dive in, first of all, how are you doing and where are you calling in from?
Ross, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm in Minneapolis. Happy to be here.
John, I've been really looking forward to our conversation. I've been really grateful for the time that we've had together over the last several months as you become the president of the foundation board at Piper Sandler. Many years ago, when we first started Scholars of Finance, you were an attendee at our first Scholars of Finance symposia in our founding days. We've been an early supporter of ours and recently have been much more involved as a key champion of ours as well at Piper. And I've been looking forward to having you on to share your story, some of your wisdom and insights on a variety of topics. I think a great place to start, sharing your story with our community. Tell us the story of you growing up, your college experience, your early career, and what's brought you to where you are today and how you've arrived here.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. I'll do it without writing an autobiography, hopefully. I grew up in a small town in Iowa, about 3 hours straight south of here, northwest central Iowa. I came up to St. Thomas to study business primarily, and I signed up for guitar lessons. So I ended up being an econ major and a music major. So I have a classical guitar degree, which is interesting. And the guitar and the music kind of fueled the interest in my academics. So then I started studying a lot more and took a real interest. There's no lawyers in my family. So when I was like a junior, I wanted to do something to carve out my own pathway. So I decided, hey, I'd like to go to law school. So I applied to law school, went to Notre Dame Law School, really liked corporate law and tax, came back to the Twin Cities and practiced at what is now Faegre Drinker Biddle in the corporate group, had amazing experiences there. About that time, Piper was spun off from US Bank, and I was working on some of the public company corporate matters while I was at the law firm and got recruited to come work here as a very junior corporate counsel attorney. And that was 20 years ago. And I've been here ever since. I've been the GC for over 10 years. I should know the exact day, but maybe 12 this year. And it's been a great fit for me. The size and the people, it just meshed, which is it's been fantastic. I've been fortunate and lucky in a lot of ways and been seeing the company through a lot of different things. So it's been a great ride.
You must be somewhat unique among the cadre of lawyers and general counsels out there, having a degree in classical guitar, a very, very creative degree. I think folks kind of stereotype lawyers as being very cerebral, very logical, but you clearly have this creative side. I'm really curious to hear more about that pivot from this creative endeavor into the law world. And what about it piqued your interest?
Yeah, I always had done the economics aspect of it, and the family, my dad sort of expected me to come out of it with a business degree of some sort. So the guitar was kind of my thing, and I oscillated between major and minor, and decided that when I was a senior, heck, I'm going to go for it and, take these additional classes to sort of become a major and do the senior recital, which is 45 minutes, and learn it. I think there's absolutely a place between the creative side and the analytical side, and I'm guessing some of the best business people in the world spend a lot of time trying to come up with creative solutions to things. I was talking about some deck this morning and trying to come up with a different way to present the information, something that was creative. So it's obviously very analytical driven. And I sort of learned over time, even though I didn't think I was, analytical as math driven, sort of econ of music is actually analytical, math driven. I learned something about myself through that process. It's why I liked tax law more than I liked litigating and reading cases and writing cases. And so I think you have to understand how the creativity works within your analytical mind. It doesn't have to be like, I'm analytical, but not creative. You 100% can be analytical and creative. I mean, code breakers, mathematicians, I think when you get at a really super high level, that those folks are thinking about things differently. And so I would change maybe how people think about the word creative and sort of using that part of your brain. I absolutely think it'll make you a better person in finance to be somewhat creative.
I'm really curious to hear kind of how you use that creative side in your work day to day, how the folks around you use their creative side. Where does that creativity really come out?
Yeah, I think the clearest example is coming up with a solution where you feel like you're jammed on something. I remember when I was at the law firm and we were talking about something and it was probably pretty mundane. And I had suggested, what about this? And I've seen many other people do it too on phone calls, like when you're negotiating, where you've reached an impasse and you're like, and somebody says, well, what about this? We have a lot of investment bankers, obviously. And if you're in a deal and you can say, well, what about this solution? I view that as creativity. It's thinking about something in ways that people haven't necessarily thought about it. Creativity doesn't have to be, what we typically think about it like, I don't know, writing a Pixar movie or having a comedy sketch or improvising a piece of jazz music or, creativity can be different and applied differently in the business context. And it's super important, right, to come up with solutions. So yeah, there is an aspect of it where like you're creating something that's artistic, emotes, that has emotion, but there's also an aspect of it as you're creating something to solve a problem, to a difficult thing, which is an exercise of intelligence, which I respect. And I like being around people who do that too.
John, I'm really curious to hear, and I think our listeners, students, young professionals, senior leaders alike would be interested to hear kind of more of your journey, kind of rising the ranks, if you will. There are a lot of people who get a law degree and not many who become the general counsel of a leading investment bank or financial institution. I'm really curious to hear more about values, the principles, the decision-making frameworks, the behaviors. Tell us more about, what you think helped you get to where you are.
Yep. It's a good question. People have different philosophies on this. I started at a job that was corporate counsel, and I didn't report to the general counsel. And I was the only lawyer here who didn't report to the general counsel when I came on board. And I remember there was a partner at the law firm who was he was like, hey, you should stay. And he's like, this job, it's corporate counsel. It doesn't even look like you're going in at a very high level. But I believed in the people that I was working for, the women who had hired me and the general counsel, and I liked them and I liked what they were doing and I liked the business that Piper was in. And when I got here, and I talk about this a lot with my partner, Christine Eskelson, who's the global head of human capital, because we were in the legal department together. We approach things with a lot of hard work, a lot of common sense, and we're problem solvers. And we made it easy for our managers to promote us because we tried to work hard, find solutions to problems. And it's, for me, and everybody's different, right? For me, it was a little bit by brick by brick. There's not a lot of showmanship. There's not a lot of me grandstand or things of that nature. If I had a writing assignment, I would work hard on the writing assignment, try to, again, come up with some of the creativity and try to describe what I was working on. It was, if I was in a meeting with somebody that was significant, another opportunity to demonstrate my practical approach to things. And through that, it's hard to know and it's hard to be super self-reflective. I think I was quick to come to insights about possible outcomes with respect to people. And so I think I was a good judge of saying, if I was in a board meeting, if I was in a meeting with a bunch of people, I think this is where this is going and where this is coming out. And some of that could have been just my dad had a business and still has a business in Iowa. It's a community bank. And I was around him for a lot of business decisions. So that rubbed off on me to a large extent as well. And so those, through that, I would get promoted. I will say, and I was talking about this with some high school students this week. When I became general counsel, I was 38, and a lot of people do huge things at 38 years of age, right? So it's not the biggest job in the world, but I was nervous. I was super anxious about my ability to do it. There were moments, I have good stories about when I first became general counsel, sort of how to manage that process and deal with it. And it was difficult for me. I said to the high school students, there's like 10% of the time where I'm uncomfortable with what I'm doing. Like, I mean, not just like I'm a little uncomfortable, like it's too hot in this room, but like genuinely uncomfortable, difficult sleeping at night, trying to process the anxiety. Am I going to be able to do this? Physical effects of uncomfortableness. And you have to do it. And you have to plow through those moments when the opportunity shows up and believe in yourself that you can do it. I also wasn't afraid. I was careful about when I would speak my mind in meetings with, say, the CEO or the board, but I would give them an indication of how I was thinking about things when the time was right. It's like being in an orchestra and knowing when your time, has come during the piece of music to sort of play your part. You have to be very thoughtful about that. And so I was good at that. I could anticipate outcomes. I could speak at the right times when opportunity was right in front of me and I had something to say. And I wouldn't say I embraced the discomfort, but I certainly didn't shy away from it. And I would push myself further to sort of get through it.
First of all, thank you for sharing some of that hard work. Super important. And resilience, it sounds like grit, pushing through self-doubt, pushing through new challenges, rising to the challenge, trying to do your best work you possibly can. One thing that you touched on as you were sharing piques my curiosity, and I'd imagine for some listeners too. It has to do with mental health. Scholars of Finance now exists at 60 U.S. universities at the time of this recording, with more than 3,400 students. There has not been a school year where we have not had a student suicide at one of the universities where SOF has a chapter. And mental health is something that our students are much more aware of today, I think, than past generations. There still remains this stigma around mental health, I think, especially in financial services, right? We all want to seem bulletproof, like we can work hard, push through, get the job done while we're juggling everything perfectly with excellence. But that can be a road to ruin. You expressed this sort of experience of like literally being up at night when you were initially a GC, worried about things, the decisions you're making. Can I do this? If I'm paraphrasing correctly. And I'm really curious to hear more about how you got through that and even how you recommend, whether it's students, young professionals, or even senior leaders, keep mental health strong and at the fore while performing at such a high level.
I'm happy to talk about that and give a little sort of story. So I have mental health issues sort of all around me. It's interesting. One of my close friends from Fagery, right when I started at Piper in 2005, committed suicide. Really smart guy, went to Williams College, went to the University of Minnesota Law School on a full ride. Genius of a guy, committed suicide. Actually, on the creative side, I wrote a play about our friendship and our time together and got the play produced here in town. And Christine's husband directed it and sort of dealt with him self-diagnosing his depression. So mental health, whether or not we talk about it or not, a lot of people have issues with it. Anxiety and depression are real ones. And I think when you're between the ages of 20 and 30, you're going through a lot of pressures. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're kind of at the peak of your physical health, but your mental health, that's when you start having symptoms, whether it be depression or anxiety. Some people have it earlier because I think you're facing these life choices, these sort of directional choices of like, if I do this, then I'm not going to be able to do this. And I feel like there's also pressure on top of you from people that are older, from an older generation. And some of that is honestly, I think older people wanting to help shape your future, but older people also wanting to embrace your youth because their youth has moved on, which is sort of conceptual. So there's no one right answer for everybody, but I do know with men, there's a fair amount of stigma of going to say, hey, I need help. Can I get treated for this? Can you help me with this? Or, I need help. So reducing the stigma of having people have conversations about it, sort of treating it in the right way through having conversations with professionals about it or loved ones about it. Say, hey, I think I need some help, or hey, this is going on with me, with the people that are closest to you, to have them sort of help you and guide you is super important. But it is prevalent, it's widespread, especially the anxiety with the number of inputs that come at us and sort of trying to manage the anxiety and finding the right solution for it. I got into law school, and that was another time where I was like, there's no lawyers in my family, and I was intimidated that I was at Notre Dame. Like, am I going to be able to make it or not? There were moments of very high anxiety. So it's okay to have it and plow forward with the right treatment and the people helping you in the way they need to help you. I think oftentimes with anxiety, you try to recoil from it, but you can be super successful and still say like, hey, I need a little help on this, or I need a lot of help on this. And it's okay. I think it can hit whenever, but between 20 and 30, when you're trying to figure this stuff out, it's okay to be like, what the heck is going on?
I appreciate you sharing, John. Really appreciate you sharing openly. Sorry to hear about, your friend, of course, as well. Although I know that's, long past now, but my condolences.
The playbill for the play is actually on my wall back there. It's the picture of the car back there. So he's never too far from my thoughts.
Wow. I've also had several friends from earlier phases of life take their life, and it's heart-wrenching. It's absolutely gut-wrenching. I appreciate you sharing that advice. Almost every executive I've talked to has a similar experience, right? There was anxiety, there was fear, there was self-doubt. They have ups, they have downs. I even remember speaking to a CEO once about maybe getting a therapist, and he's like, "You don't have a therapist?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "That's a competitive edge. Your emotions, your psychology is the most complex thing about you. And we'll get a speaking coach, we'll get executive coaches. We take 17 years of classes on math, writing, history, etc. But we get almost no training at all about understanding and managing our own psychological and emotional experiences. And those most profoundly affect how we relate to people, our performance, etc." He's like, "Yeah, pretty much all of the highest performing executives I know have a therapist. Like, Russ, get on it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Talking about breaking the stigma, I'm like, all these high performers behind closed doors all have a therapist, and none of them are talking about it. I'm also a huge proponent of just like basic routines, 7.5 hours of sleep, daily meditation, like strengthen the prefrontal cortex. That helps manage and control the emotions. Good nutrition, good exercise.
Yeah, I do all those things too. It's interesting. Like the sleep is important. I've changed my diet as I've gotten older, right? The exercise, I worked out this morning. I work out, 5 times a week, probably. I have things that are super engaging in my mind. I didn't play the guitar for 20 years, but I picked it up again. My kids started skiing because my wife is an excellent skier. So I started skiing at 39. But now I'm 49, so I've been skiing for 10 years. But my wife is still the total alpha on the ski hill, right? Which is usually, it's the other way around, for gender roles. So that was a total lesson in humility. But the desire to get better at it and learn and be more childlike and sort of acknowledge that you're not good at it, it has powerful effects on sort of how you see things and how you approach people and your empathy towards people. And it's like you're exercising your competitive drive, but you're also doing it with humility. I think that's super important. When I first became GC, I had a leadership coach for 3 years. I haven't meditated for a while, but I would meditate when I first became GC. I would go find a conference room, set a timer on an app on my phone and meditate for 10 to 20 minutes. I do that less now, but yeah, all of those things mean something to me in terms of having this steadiness. I can definitely see people be like, oh, another person who meditates for their mental health, right? Or another person who works out for their mental health. But for me, as I've gotten older, those things have worked. I still have tried to do things that are dropping into a black diamond when you're, 45 and you've never done it before, right? That'll wake you up.
I hear you. I went skiing for the first time in 3 seasons, and when everyone's like, "How did it go?" I'm like, "No injuries. That was a win." And we dropped into some powdery black diamonds and no injuries. I appreciate you sharing your own habits. And for anyone who's listening who does eye roll and say, "Oh, more advice to meditate," I would actually say while we're all different and unique, there are parts about every one of us that are universal. All of our limbic systems and brains and prefrontal cortices work the same way. And we've got a part of our brain where that anxiety resides, our limbic system, and we have a part of our brain that can manage and modulate the other part, our prefrontal cortex. And meditation, by the research now, tons of evidence is showing meditation is minute for minute the single best thing you can do to strengthen your prefrontal cortex, which is our ability to manage those emotions. So to anyone who's listening, who, if they eye rolled when you said that, I'm going to say, rescind your eye roll, listener, because there's just now enormous science basically backing up what John has said.
Got a minor one for you. I go to work and I go home, usually in the car, depends, but like without the radio on, like just in total silence. Definitely in the morning, almost every morning, there's no radio on in the car. There's nothing on in the car. You can put too much stuff in your mind. I scroll through Instagram like everybody, but you can put too much stuff in there. So you got to find quiet moments where you shut out the noise.
I appreciate that advice. I'm going to start implementing that. The research backs that up too. You need to just you need to settle into your default mode network and not be processing and analyzing things. You just need time for your brain to rest throughout the day. Thanks, John. I appreciate the quick deep dive on mental health. I think it's a super important subject. I want to hard pivot us into an entirely different topic, coming back to what you do professionally as GC at Piper Sandler. For our younger listeners, can you share a little bit, just kind of 101 on what your day-to-day looks like, what you're doing, what your responsibilities are as general counsel? And then for our more senior listeners, we have C-suite executives that reach out after our episodes. Can you kind of share a little bit about common misunderstandings about their GCs, or what you wish they knew or could, empathize with regarding their GC, or, any GC they'll work with?
So the day-to-day, I always say, divided into 3 categories. So my first category is, we're a public company. So CEO, public company, board level strategic discussion is like a third of my job. And some of that is public company governance. What does the comp committee need to approve? What do we have to do coming up? What do we want to do for this board meeting? What's on the agendas? Let's go through the agendas of the board meeting. What approvals do we need here? How is this all going to structure? What's the flow of it? When do we want to talk about this corporate development activity at the board level? So that's a third of my job. The second third of my job, we're highly regulated, and we're also the target of, litigation. So I spend a third of my job on regulatory and litigation defense. Did not have a background in that whatsoever, and have learned it over time and got some great outside counsel partners. And then the last third of it is straight up management of people on my team, going through the review process with everybody, going through retirements, new hires, conflict within the group, sorting that out, helping people develop. So those are kind of the 3 buckets. Like just today, I've had reviews this week. I should go this week. I've had reviews this week, year-end reviews. I had a call this morning about an SEC enforcement attorney. I've talked to 2 other general counsels, not an enforcement matter. I've talked to 2 other general counsels at other large financial services firms today. That's the regulatory thing. And I've spent a little bit of time thinking about the upcoming board meeting. So that's in a nutshell right there. Those are the 3 big categories. The last one on the general counsel role, I'll maybe respond to that in a sort of reflective of myself and always trying to do self-improvement. Sometimes I don't always know if general counsels, I feel like there's been a little bit of a diminishment of the general counsel role in the past 20 years. There's been an uptick, I think, in the past 6 months of more general counsels going on boards. But for a while there, it's hard for a lawyer to get on a public company board. It's gotten a little bit better, like I said, recently. I think general counsels have to be in all the strategic conversations. I think it's limiting if we focus on, let's say, the governance aspects of things to the exclusion of other things, or some of the technical aspects of the role. I mean, knowing that stuff is fantastic, but you kind of got to be at the front flame of the strategic imperative of the company to, whatever the company's strategic imperative is. For us, it's balancing growth with stability and understanding how to accomplish that, understanding how the analysts cover us and think about us, understanding what the role of corp dev is, understanding, who are the future leaders in the company, providing that level of advice to the CEO. You want the CEO, who's typically your boss, to call you and have the conversation with you. If the CEO doesn't see a need to get your input on decisions because it's of a technical nature and it's not relative to his just strategic decision making, over time, you won't report to the general counsel. So I guess in terms of GCs at large, I would say we have to, make sure that we are giving the best advice and being business partners with a legal focus to our CEOs to help them navigate the tough things that they have to face, whether it be the board or some regulatory thing or just, a corporate development matter.
Understood. Jack Pitts, who's a GC over at Blackstone, is also a supporter of ours like yourself. And hearing both of you talk about the GC role and the importance of the GC role, it makes a lot of sense. We had Hester Peirce on the podcast in the past, right from the SEC, Commissioner Peirce. And it's interesting. We even had Helene Glotzer on the podcast before, who was GC at Bridgewater. It's really interesting triangulating all your perspectives. I mean, there are laws, there are regulatory requirements. And I remember my time at SoFi, a lot of our revenue, our marketing and growth functions, there was tension between some of those revenue and growth functions, front office folks and legal and compliance sometimes. I would hear front office people complain about legal and compliance. And I would always say, guys, they're the ones who let us keep our jobs. We've seen firms who break laws, who quickly lose their license to do business or lose trust in the market. And our legal and compliance teams make sure that we are in accordance with, our laws, our regulations, our moral and ethical codes, not to mention, right? We think about that a lot at Sellers of Finance. That's really, really important. It's an absolutely required function in a business.
My philosophy on that is you have to be respected and you have to do it in partnership and not through edicts. So, I make it a point, I've been trying to make it a point to get to know key leaders here at Piper, spend time with them, understand the business a little bit better. And, just if there is something they're like, oh, I don't, this is difficult, right? Or this changes my work habits, because there are compliance related things. If they are unhappy, but they trust in you, the decision that you're making because they know you, I think it goes a little bit better. And some people, it's tougher, because if there's truly a bad fit, then that's a tougher decision. But most people who've been here a long time, I can trust and they can trust me.
I think one of my key takeaways from talking to you and others is legal leaders, GCs, legal teams, compliance teams, they are operating in the best interest of the clients and of the enterprise. They are protecting and preserving the organization's ability to maintain trust with clients. And so my key takeaway, my synthesis is that what you do is so fundamentally necessary and a great gift to any, to the organization you serve.
So everybody here thinks of it as a great gift.
Those who have wisdom, I'm sure they do.
Smart people do appreciate a good lawyer.
Yep. Yeah. Smart people, wise people, people who see the bigger and longer term picture, appreciate their lawyer in the room. One thing I want to ask, given that, is about how you're thinking about changes in laws. We've got a new administration, and I'm curious how you as a GC think about scenario plan for the potential different realities you may be in. There's so much uncertainty. How do you approach that and kind of scenario plan, if at all?
Yep. I'm a middle of the road guy. I'm a pretty steady Eddie, so I'm not one to swing one direction and then swing the other direction. And some of that is, I'm trying to flatten out the highs and lows. If we need to make changes that are in the best interests of our clients, our shareholders, and the communities that we live and work in, I think those absolutely make sense. And I'm happy to do them, those changes. If they go too far and the time isn't right to do them, in the past 5 years, we've been through COVID. Minneapolis had a massive amount of unrest. Work from home has changed significantly. You got to kind of be an all-weather person when you're in the role for a long period of time. So you got to have really good outside partners too. Have really good outside counsel, good people to talk to. You have good internal partners, because our strategic mission, right, is to be profitable, have a good margin, do the right thing, help our communities, try to grow our market share, try to grow our market cap. And you can do all those things in all weather.
John, shifting to another sort of vector where there's a lot of uncertainty and change is AI, something obviously everyone's been talking about lately. It's so common now. To what extent are you and the firm thinking about AI, both from a legal perspective, from an ethical perspective? And I'm just curious also to hear your personal opinion, kind of how you view it.
Yeah, I have this newspaper clipping on my desk at home that said, we've seen generations of technological change, but it's never changed the need for individual character. And my grandmother from Georgia snipped it out of a newspaper and sent it to me. And I think AI fits right into that. So I'm fine with AI. I have some, I don't know it that well, apprehension, but I think the question is, will it make the lives better for a lot of the analysts that work for us, sort of going to the young folks that work here? Can they, instead of having to work on a pitch deck, can they use an AI tool? And we've developed one in-house to help them prepare information and the materials that they need to do so they don't have to work some, all-nighter that otherwise wouldn't be necessary. So I think that's a positive. Specific to the legal function, we're looking at something that can look, non-disclosure agreements come up all the time. They're not really worth a lot of our time to look at. They're pain, but they're necessary. So is there an AI tool that can crank through non-disclosure agreements and just tell us right away, like, these changes aren't, you don't want to agree to this, you want to agree to that. So some of that's interesting to me. So I don't really, at this point, I'm interested to see what change can happen through it. And again, I'm not one for gigantic, big grandstanding, like this is going to be the biggest shift in the whole world. People may have differences of opinion, but I think we'll factor that in and hopefully make our lives better. Sometimes I see technology come in and then it frees up time for you so that something else can take the time and you're still working just as hard. So I would like to see AI make life a little bit easier for the analysts. If I'm being totally honest, I'd like to, take away some of the more mundane tasks in the legal field. And I'm sure there's going to be disruption that I don't know about, that's going to be ongoing as well. And it'll have a huge impact on legal research. I recently was listening to something, they were talking about an AI system take the bar exam. And when it first went through, it finished in the bottom quartile, I think. And then by the time they had revised it, it was like beating 90% of the people who were taking the bar exam. So it's going to do some serious stuff.
I appreciate you pointing out that when technology enters and frees up time doing one thing, it opens up time doing another. You mentioned your analysts. My hope for all analysts and all associates and literally every single person in financial services is that as AI frees up more of our time, tying this back to our conversation on mental health, maybe we can fill that time with work on our mental health, on our emotional and physical health. If you're married, on marital health, if you're a young person feeling lonely, on relational health. Those things take work. So before you go to your boss and say, I've got 10 more free hours suddenly, like, make sure you're in a healthy, balanced place first and see what you need to do to keep that. And then go with the extra 4 hours you have in a week and load up and step up more. John, pivoting and kind of coming to an end here soon, you've been really supportive of Scholars of Finance. Like I mentioned before, you've attended several of our symposia, or now they're called leadership conferences, but formerly leadership symposia in Minneapolis. Now, here you are in the podcast. You'll be speaking at one of our chapters this spring. We've spent some time together. I'm really glad that Deb pulled us together and grabbed time for all of us to sync with Ryan Quinlivan, of course, our co-founder. I'm just curious, what is it about Scholars of Finance that's inspired you to get involved and want to spend your time supporting the mission? Why might you encourage other leaders and other funders to get involved and support our work? If you want to make a plug.
Absolutely. And I remember being at the table and being around the students, Carlson students that were trying to figure out what to do in life and, sort of figure out the maze of finance, and also people who are new to finance that were trying to break down barriers to enter into finance and figure out what it means. And I think there's great opportunity there. And you guys are connecting that opportunity to minds that otherwise hadn't considered it, which I think is fantastic. And then also the sort of whole person approach to it and what that means to you. Kind of what it means to be a scholar, right? What it means to be a scholar. You think of a scholar as someone who loves what they do, has a genuine curiosity, wants to continue to learn what they do, be excellent at what they do, but also do it in a way that is mindful of the communities in which they're from and who they are, which is fantastic, right? And having people around, I love spending time with there's other guitar majors, like spending time with the guitar majors or the other econ majors. And I remember looking up to the people that were a grade ahead of me and like studying for the microeconomic theory exam with them. So having people to take the journey with you that you like, that are inclusive and not exclusive, I think is super important. I see you guys doing that and I like it. I think it makes you a better person as you come up.
Well, John, thank you. Appreciate your support. and your involvement, your wisdom and leadership in our mission and with our team, with our students. It means a lot. Thanks for sharing about your story, diving into mental health, talking about your work as a GC, talking about AI. I'm sure our listeners will find this as interesting as I did. Hope we can have you on again in the future and cover more topics.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, John. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Investing in Integrity by Scholars of Finance. I want to share a huge thank you to our advisors, directors, donors, team, and our members who make this all possible. If you like this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you have any feedback for us, you can send it to hello@scholarsoffinance.org or by visiting our website. Until next time, please join us on our mission to inspire character and integrity in the finance leaders of tomorrow.